Marvelous hello, friends and row-battlers! How are you today? So, last year on Patreon, I held a special tournament where my patrons voted on which game from a series I've already covered they most wanted to see me do a video on. Well, the results came in, and there was one clear-cut winner, and that was Medabots for the Game Boy Advance, which I am playing on the Wii U for reasons that will become very apparent later. To make a quick correction from my Metabots AX video, I said that this game was a remake of the first Metabots game, but it turns out it's not. It's actually a remake of the second Metabots game. The first Metabots game has you playing as the younger version of the character most of us know as Henry. And as someone who loved Henry from the anime, this was pretty cool to learn. Much like Medabots AX, this game came in both Metabee and Rokusho versions. I know we established last time that Rokusho is way cooler.
A dark cloud hangs over the city tonight. I can feel it.
God, he's so cool. But I figured since this one is more story-driven, I wanted to pick the option closer to the anime, so we're gonna be going with Metabee this time. The game opens up similar to Pokemon. Ikki Tenryo heads to Dr. Aki's lab, only instead of getting his first partner with whom he'll form a lasting friendship, Ikki gets punched in the face. You don't even get your first Medabot from Dr. Aki, but instead from the mini-mart because your mom sends you to buy food for dinner. But instead, Henry tricks you into buying the Metabee parts. It's like Jack and the Beanstalk.
Only more interesting because it involves robots.
Hey, if you like what I'm doing here, please consider subscribing. It honestly does help the channel out a lot more than people realize. Thank you. The main gameplay of Medabots is in the row battles, which start out slow and simple enough with only one Medabot on each team, but before too long, 3v3 becomes the norm. Row battles are won whenever the leader's head part is destroyed, regardless of who else is left standing. It's not a typical turn-based RPG and uses its own take on an ATB system of sorts. See, at this charging port thing, you choose which part you want your Medabot to use on that turn, and they start walking to the middle of the battlefield. Once they get there, they'll use the move and start walking back to the chargy porty thingy. Moves can target and destroy different meta parts, rendering them unusable, and if you destroy their legs, they'll obviously do the whole running back and forth thing much slower. It's not a terrible system, and there are even times when you'll be able to destroy the part your enemy was going to use before they make it to the center, essentially wasting their turn. Of course, this can also happen to you, so yeah, I got nothing. It just sucks when that happens. Your party members come in the form of different metals, which can level up and learn new powerful abilities, but the bots themselves are constructed using whichever parts you want. However, each metal gets bonuses for using a specific type of part, so Metabee's Kabuto metal gets boosted whenever it uses shooting parts. And there is a nice variety of parts with plenty of different effects. You've got ranged attacks, melee attacks, healing abilities, stat boosting abilities, passive abilities, abilities that come with secondary effects like causing status ailments. It's all pretty impressive, and there are even subcategories like having normal guns and chain guns. The great thing about Medabots is it's a game that allows you to build your team however you think is best. My main strategy was to have Metabee primarily handle offense, my Spider Medabot laying down traps that could make several enemies destroy themselves, and a Mermaid Medabot who often took on healing duties, stat buffs, status ailments, or whatever else I needed her to do. I always made sure my parts were able to do chain reactions, which mean if you destroy a part, any leftover damage you would have done gets transferred to another part. If you get lucky, this will destroy your opponents. Speaking of, I do want to criticize the destroy ability. See, these attacks can instantly wreck any part regardless of how much armor or HP it has remaining, with the downside being it will only work if you hit a Medabot that's facing away from you. It seems like a fair compromise, but these things can just... Okay, well, let me just show you. Now you might be asking, well John, if you're so smart and handsome, why don't you use these parts if they're so powerful? I'm glad you asked. See, It doesn't work when I do it. I don't know if I just needed a more specific metal or what, but anytime I had to fight Metabots with the destroy ability, I would get wrecked. Now, whenever you win a fight, you're rewarded with a meta part from your opponent.
That's good.
But you don't get to choose which part you take.
That's bad.
But, remember how I said I was playing on the Wii U? This meant I was able to make save states before the battle officially ended, which allowed me to reload until I got the part I wanted.
That's good.
And I advise that you save regularly because if you lose a fight, your opponent gets to take one of your parts. Usually. Some fights, if you lose, you just die.
Can I go now?
Sorry, but you can only go if you have a Rubber Robo Medal, a limited use item that you can only earn from beating specific opponents, and are the only way to avoid random battles. That's dumb. It's so dumb, I had to mention it. Around the middle of the game, I just started stockpiling these so I could get through dungeons uninterrupted. One big criticism I have with Medabots' battle system is that it's an RPG where I feel like I have very little control over what actually happens. Sure, I choose the parts I want, and you can control your Metabot's speed somewhat by choosing legs that do well in whatever environment you're fighting in, but you don't get to control who you attack. Melee parts will always just attack whoever is closest to you, and ranged attacks just seem to choose a random Metabot's random part. If there's any way to change this, I couldn't figure it out. The worst part is if one of your other Metabots destroys that part before your ranged attacker gets to the middle, they just go, whoops, there's nothing for me to aim at, guess I'll do nothing this turn. Like, shoot anything, I'm really not picky. To give an example, there was a fairly early fight when I only had 2 Metabots and had to fight this core guy who had 3 Metabots that all seemed pretty tough. So I started charging up Metabee's Metaforce ability, which is basically a big screw you Kamehameha. It ended up not only hitting the leader, but immediately taking out his head, which ended the fight. I didn't feel like I'd won because I grinded appropriately, or picked the best parts, or even had a good strategy. It just felt like I'd won because
the RNG gods smile upon us.
And that's not a good feeling in an RPG. Alright, so that's gameplay, but what about the plot of Metabots? There really isn't much of one. It's actually a fairly picaresque narrative, where Icky just gets thrown into a variety of wacky adventures all in unique set pieces. The goal is generally to stop whatever the evil but stupid Rubber Robo Gang is up to, whether you're stopping their diabolical plot to use Metabots to tickle cute girls, or traveling through time and space to rescue a village and their princess from a rampaging Metabot. Yeah, it's pretty all over the place. Plot is not really their bread and butter, but I do think Metabots makes up for it in its dialogue. This game actually did make me laugh out loud a couple of times, and if you're like me and watched a lot of the anime, you'll probably recognize most of these faces, and I absolutely read all their dialogue in their voices from the show. And all your favorites are here. You've got Phantom Renegade, Karen, and of course, the Screws. Although I've gotta say, I really don't remember Sloane being this into laundry in the show. Seriously, almost every line this guy has is related to laundry, and when he finally did say something else, it was a Monty Python reference. Oh yeah, and also this. Well, it's a good thing you were planning on doing laundry. Also, speaking of clothes, this game has a weird fascination with having Icky cross-dress, as this happens like 4 or 5 times throughout the story. But I have to say, it's usually handled pretty well. Karen sees Icky in a dress, and she's just like, yeah, hey, you look nice. A lot of the dungeons in this game are pretty annoying, and usually just involve fighting the same opponents over and over again in succession. Now, I do realize this was probably done to make sure you can collect all the parts for any new Metabots without being a save-scumming cheater like me, but fighting the same enemies in basically linear succession gets old really fast, and this is on top of dealing with random encounters along the way. It turns out the big twist in Metabots is that this super obviously evil-looking guy is actually evil. I didn't put a spoiler tag on that because just look at him, did you really need one? The final boss is pretty tough, and I actually had to completely mix up the strategy that had gotten me through most of the game in order to win. Then there's also this secret ultimate boss that you can find if you know where to look, where you fight what is essentially the Medabot version of Baby from Dragon Ball GT. It's
Oh, baby! My beautiful baby! Please, make up!
really unsettling. I won this fight by using traps to take out their only attacker, and then just making sure I stayed alive until the timer ran out, so I was declared the winner by default. Sure, it may sound like a lazy, sneaky, and underhanded way to win, but come on, what else was I supposed to do? Destroy a baby? I don't need that in my life right now. So wait a minute, if I had a lot of issues with the combat, and the plot wasn't anything special, and I put in the effort of both save scumming and collecting rubber robo medals so I could avoid fighting, what did I like about this game? Like I said, the dialogue was pretty solid, and I think what saves it is there is something truly satisfying about picking the right parts to pull off a chain of attacks that wipes the floor with your opponents. Like laying down that trap you need so your opponent destroys their own legs, allowing your slightly slower offensive fighter to get a good clean shot at one of their arms. Though there are still some things I wish the battle system allowed a bit more control over. Like if I do want to use my big screw you Kamehameha, I'd like to choose who I shoot with it. I also want to take a moment to highlight that the game looks pretty darn good. Both the miniature and full sprites of every single part in this game look fantastic. And even though it's basically all utilizing the same animation, I really loved watching the battles in this game. Like seriously, the sprite work is great, and I'll definitely mark that down as a high point of this title. Medabots on Game Boy Advance is such a weird game. I feel like so much of this video was just me complaining about things, and yet, I can't say I disliked it. While it definitely has problems, there is a sense of fulfillment that comes with it, and collecting new parts, even ones I knew I was never going to use, was pretty addictive. That said, I think I was only able to play as much as I did because I was save scumming the Wii U restore points. I really don't think I would have had the patience to finish this game if I'd been playing on a normal GBA cartridge. But those save states helped me realize what would have made me like this game a lot more. Give the player more control over what happens in battle, and let us choose which part we want to take from our opponents. That second thing would have allowed for fewer forced battles against the exact same enemies, and sure, it would have been a shorter game, but this game was already about 40 hours long, and not in a good way. I think between Metabots the RPG and Medabots AX, the arena fighter, I'd probably go back to Medabots AX more than I would this one. Medabots was pretty fun, but just not one of my favorite titles. Heck, I can't even say it's my favorite robot collecting RPG on the Game Boy Advance. That honor will always go to Robopon 2 Ring version, which I should probably talk about one of these days. I am a little curious if future Metabots games improved upon any of the issues I talked about in this video. I mean, the last Metabots game to ever come out stateside was Metabots Infinity on the GameCube back in 2003, which I guess you all might want to see me do a video on one day. The Metabot series is still going pretty strong in Japan, where, yes, I'm aware it's called Medarot over there. There was a collection released for the Nintendo Switch, there was a mobile game focusing on this new Metabot mascot, and I still can't get over the fact that there was a 3DS RPG that combined Metabots mechanics with ripping off girls' clothes. And that's as good a place as any to end this video because I really don't know where to go from there.
Today's winner, Metabee. The row battle continues next time on Medabots.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, be sure to click like, but if you really liked it, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future videos. Extra special thanks to all my friends and loved ones over on Patreon, which you can pledge to today to see your own name in these ending credits. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, take care.